What's the biggest double life you've ever personally seen revealed? Adoptive parents were killed in a fire and left, and they were that they wanted her to go back to her bio parents. My uncle and his girlfriend sincerely regretted giving their daughter up, and so they were thrilled. Everyone just went with the fact that they were essentially keeping a secret child for 4 years and were pretty much okay with it. My cousin is 14 now and she has 2 full siblings, and my aunt and uncle are great parents. Every now and again someone brings up the situation, but it's pretty much just laughed off. I do find it a little odd though. A well-respected family of 2 teachers with 2 cute kids, the husband at the high school and the wife at the elementary school in the fairly high-income town they lived in. Turns out the wife was dealing drugs without husband knowing, got busted at school, cops showed up to elementary and high school, lost her job and they got divorced. She moved away. Sounds like a Netflix show. Guy I used to work with. He lived in a small country town with his wife and 3 kids. When he was fired from his job, where I worked, he could only find something at his level in the big city 2 hours away, so he would go to work in the city Monday to Friday, and home to his wife and kids on the weekends. This went on for years. It came out about 5 years into the arrangement that he wasn't living in the small crappy city apartment as he said, he was living with his girlfriend and their 2 kids. So he had a wife and 3 kids, and a girlfriend with 2 kids, all his. Apparently the girlfriend knew about the wife, but the wife had no idea about the girlfriend, and his 3 country kids had 2 younger siblings that they knew nothing about. It of course blew up spectacularly. The wife kicked him out and he went to live with the girlfriend. 6 months later she was sick of him and kicked him to the curb too. So now he pays child support for 5 kids to 2 different women and is actually living in that small crappy apartment. We had a guy in high school who faked a deep voice for the 7 years we've known him, and senior year he revealed that it wasn't his real voice. A guy I knew was a tattooist, so worked late hours at night. He had a family with 4 kids in one neighborhood that was about an hour away from his shop. Then he had another girlfriend with a kid about 20 minutes away. The two didn't know about each other. He lived out of both of his girlfriend's houses, and when he wasn't at one of their houses, the girlfriend would think he was at his parents' due to working late. Anyway, it all unfolded on him when he got arrested and ended up in prison, and both girlfriends, all the kids and another side girlfriend that he was seeing all rocked up to visit him on the same day. My boyfriend's sister's friend was married to this guy and had started a family with him. They just had their second child actually. The first was probably 7-8 years old. Every year he went on a hunting trip to Missouri for about a week. Turns out he wasn't hunting. He had another family there. 2 kids, almost exactly the same ages as the other 2. The friend divorced him immediately when she found out. I know a guy who faked cancer, but when he traveled to a town an hour or so away for his chemo, he was really groping children. He worked for a car rental company and got them to comp him rentals to go for his treatments. Oh, and he had a few of us almost convinced that his landlord was a child predator, and the actual reason their home had that very phrase spray painted on it by parties unknown. So yeah, the diddler who faked cancer to enable his child predation and CP production would have to be the craziest double life of anyone I've known. A local pastor in Florida gave me private marriage counseling many years ago. He was pious and godly, and I respected him very much. He insisted that the sanctity of marriage demanded that I make sacrifices of some of my desires, and that God would reward me later, in this life and marriage, for those sacrifices. About a month after the counseling concluded, he was forced to resign from his church. Turns out he got caught fricking his assistant pastor's wife. My friend's ex got arrested for kidnapping and hundreds of counts of CP. I only know what I've read in the papers, but I guess he would go to chat rooms and prey on vulnerable 12-year-olds. He'd make them do drugs and self-mutilate while he took pictures. My friend has a son with him and met him when she was like 16. She's 26 now. He's in his late 40s. So gross. He's in prison for I believe 35 plus years. My cousin. He played it super cool around me and the rest of the family. I even admired him for it. However, he was a huge M-head and became increasingly paranoid and combative. He started crap with the wrong people and ended up getting gunned down in a drive-by. I was a pallbearer at his funeral. My friend is a divorce attorney and has a client right now who is a wealthy guy in his 40s or 50s. He was told he was terminally ill, so he went and started a relationship with a stripper and got her pregnant. He ended up recovering, and the stripper had the kid. He's been supporting the stripper and the kid without his family knowing for years. The older guy and his wife are now divorcing, and the stripper issue, which the wife still has yet to know about, is making things complicated. Not sure if this counts as a double life, exactly, but my mom's a total sociopath and got away with presenting herself as this total hippie mother I'll do anything for my kids person till I was 23 or so, at which point I found out she was stealing my identity, forging my checks, and then me and my sister realized that my dad, who'd recently divorced her, wasn't lying when he said she'd run up crazy credit card bills, cashed out his retirement account, filed false tax returns to cover it, and oh yeah, the 19-year-old boys that she'd let stay in our house because they had falling outs with their parents were really drug dealers, and also she was bangling them. So, not exactly double lives, more like an insane amount of lying and manipulation. She did a lot more crazy crap, but it would take way too many words to explain. Cut her out of my life a decade ago, was crappy for a while, all good now. A friend's mother is adopted. No big deal. She knows about it since she was 5 and loved her adoptive mom to bits, so it was never an issue. When she was in her late 20s, she discovered she had a brother which lived in a nearby city for the Brazilians amongst us. We are all in Sao Paulo and her brother was living in Santos, so she decided to go after him. It turns out her brother, who was in his early 30s, did not know he was adopted. He had a fit and even slapped his mom in the face. When my dad married my stepmom, natural mom died young from cancer. She was warm and so proud to add me and my 2 sibs to her family of 2 boys, and for a while, things went pretty well. She really seemed to be into making a home out of the fixer-upper house she and dad snagged in a nice neighborhood. They had an active social life, a membership at the yacht club. Apparently dad's 20-foot sailboat qualified, knew the mayor and his wife, a few local celebs, and so on. Her only weirdness seemed to be a monthly change of self-employed, career focus, clothing designer, painter, decorator, importer, and many I forget. She had no qualifications but somehow could get contracts to redo an apartment lobby or repaint a large car dealership. Then things started to go south between dad and her. She was impatient to be climbing the money and social ladders in town, and dad was a prudent manager of his finances. Their arguments and fights got louder and more frequent. Finally, one tragic night, after a huge battle, she died in an accident, but what was discovered afterward was jaw-dropping. For years, she had been keeping a downtown apartment for daytime intimate liaisons with men she likely thought able to give her what dad couldn't, money. It had a king-size bed with a mirrored ceiling above it, and other features they wouldn't tell me about. She even had an ongoing affair with dad's employer, a wealthy married man whose wife we had considered to be one of stepmom's best friends. The sources of the various contracts she had obtained for her half-baked business plans became clear. Her collection of male clients, repainting and refurnishing a building lobby for an exorbitant fee had little to do with her abilities or knowledge. Thousands of dollars in new, high-end furniture marched out the door one night because she didn't have it chained down. But to our neighbors and casual friends, it was just the tragic death of a devoted mother and homemaker. Well, my mom had power of attorney over some clients' properties. We had to have them appraised for some legal procedures. I went with the appraiser to the apartment and the guy who had rented it for years, always paying on time, received us. He is a nice guy, very professional. I only knew him because his checks always arrived on time. He is also a lawyer. I'm pretty sure I know his daughters. He lives in a nice neighborhood and all. He greets me and the appraiser and looking a bit nervous opens the door for us. And he had turned that apartment in a frick dungeon. I then understood why I was delegated to oversee the appraisal. This guy had had a mistress, a second family for like 10 years, and had a double life that apparently only me, my mom and her client knew about. He even had a daughter with his mistress that had a lovely Disney princess bedroom for her. Next to the mirrors on the ceiling, special furniture, whips and scented candles, love nest that the lawyer shared with her mother. I handled it very professionally. I was 21 at the time. It was hilarious. The things you see in the job. Old neighborhood friend of mine found out his wife was an escort with a drug problem about a year after their marriage. She got pregnant right out of high school and they got married. He worked long hours trying to support his wife and baby daughter while she played bingo and left the baby at his parents' house. She used dating sites to find men and used the money she earned to fuel a coke problem. He found out when a mutual friend of ours used the dating site and saw her profile. He then played along as his profile picture didn't include his face and found out the going rate. When the husband confronted her, she bragged about sleeping with more than 3 men a week on average and the fact he was too dumb to notice it, and the coke and the fact she had been stealing from his parents. He was however bright enough to have a police officer friend help record her and show it to the judge. She went to prison, briefly, and he kept everything in full custody. I don't know the story very well, but there was a 20-something-year-old guy in a nearby town that died, leaving a will that gave a bunch of money to his sister with a note that she couldn't have it until she got clean from drugs and went to college. At her graduation, the guy shows up and admits that he faked his death and was living overseas, still gave her the money and helped her open a business with it. I knew a girl from United Arab Emirates that came to Canada for uni. Her parents were super ballers, like $5 million house back in UAE. She lived in a really nice apt right downtown Toronto, and she had a huge allowance and a CC for whatever she wanted online. Her mother wore a burqa and her family was super religious and straight edge. The double life? She was a hardcore raver party girl who was almost never sober and was in an open relationship with a girl. Her apt was a disaster. Ketamine covered mirrors all over the place and suspicious drug baggies in every conceivable crevasse. Takeout food boxes, clothes and crap everywhere. You could hardly see the floor. She was a royal freaking mess any country you are from. If her parents knew 1/10,000th of what was going on, she would be in deep crap. I remember seeing her a couple of times before her parents came for a visit, incredibly distraught, rocking back and forth with K all over her face repeating "Gotta call Mary Maid, gotta call Mary Maid," a service that specialized in cleaning up party houses. The day before her parents arrived you could eat off of any surface in the house. All the clothes were ninja folded, her crazy raver stuff was at her GFS. Her fridge had reasonable food in it, and she was sober, bright-eyed, and bushy-tailed. This would make a great commercial for Mary Maid. We had a brother-in-law we all liked a lot. The guy had a huge personality, was fun to be around, held a great job, and had a beautiful wife and young daughter. One day the FBI came and arrested him for CP. Nobody saw it coming. He ended up doing some serious prison time and basically lost everything. A work colleague was exposed as an illegal immigrant using a false identity. He absconded back to his home country of Iraq and on arrival was arrested and hanged for war crimes. We only found this out when his wife threatened to sue the company for exposing him. I worked at Victoria's Secret for quite a few years. I saw a lot of shady crap, but the worst was an encounter over holiday season. Guy comes up with some sexy lingerie and some nice flannel pajamas. Asks them to be bagged separately and for separate gift receipts in the bag. Easy enough for the new cashier I'm training, I think, so I'll leave to assign breaks. Few days later he comes back raging, just screaming and cussing everyone out. Turns out the new cashier mixed the gift receipts up. Wife found out about mistress. There really was no fixing that situation considering the dude was just a prick in general and I had no desire to make the situation right, so I just called security and went about my day. Not really revealed because it was always in the open, but my parents' friend has the weirdest double life situation I've ever seen. Paul was married to Clarissa for 12 years, and they had a son together. However, Paul and Clarissa break up, and Paul moves out. Shortly after Paul starts dating Jenny, Jenny gets pregnant. Paul realizes he misses Clarissa, and somehow talks Jenny and Clarissa into sharing him. Then, a few years later, Paul adds Renee to the mix. I should throw in these are decent looking women with jobs, and Paul himself is no rich Adonis either. So, Paul has a wife and 2 girlfriends. They each have their own house on the same street, and their own individual family lives. Paul spends the night with a different one each night, and they trade holidays. The women aren't romantically involved and they barely interact, so it's not like a poly relationship or even a sister-wife deal. How he pulled this off and how they make it work is beyond me, but it's been years now. Speech 100. Stopped at a McDonald's before a concert with some buddies. Place is packed. We get our food and sit down just in time to see a woman stand up and scream at the guy she is with, "What the frick do you mean you are married?" Place goes silent, even the kids on the play structure. She proceeds to yell at him for a minute and then storms out. Place is silent until some guy in the back yells, "That was freaking awesome." Place erupts in laughter and goes back to normal. Dude never looked up from his fries. My best friend was a law secretary, engaged. I was to be a bridesmaid, and planning a baby. She was also moonlighting as an escort, having frequent unprotected group frick sessions. When I prepared some literature about compulsive erotic behavior and found a therapist for her, she cut me out of her wedding and life. High school teacher, 40 at the time, in my hometown was married with kids and decided to run away with one of the 6th form students. For you American folk, 6th form college is 16-18 in the UK. Apparently they'd been seeing each other since she was 15, so not legal basically. When the school caught wind, all of his work tech such as laptops and phones was searched through. When they found proof, he was removed from the school and put under police watch for a few days whilst the situation died down, because it spread like wildfire. He left his wife and kids, now has a house with her. I believe they're very happy together, but it's still a fricked situation. Good friend's parents were swingers. Neither one of us had a clue until a decade after we moved out when my mom told me they propositioned her. I have 2 pretty good ones. My aunt was dating this dude named Joe. He was a baseball player in minor league systems, single and AA. He was an awesome guy, handsome, funny, and people in my family loved Joe. Everyone except for my grandma, my aunt's mom. She always confided to other members of the family that Joe seemed like a closeted fellow, which was her way of saying he liked men. Well, it turns out that Joe did indeed like men. My Aunt Dawn grew increasingly suspicious of Joe and started to tail him randomly. She eventually caught him dressing up in drag and going to gay clubs. The other one is a friend's GF was an adult caregiver. When they were first dating she was alive but then moved in with him and became one that had multiple clients she did on certain days of the week. Eventually they grew really serious and they both decided to pick up some extra work to save up for a house and a nice wedding. He is grinding about 65-70 hours a week between his machine job and working at an MC Sports while she does the caregiving and is working for a cleaning company in the evening. They gone on like this for almost a year and a half, just banking the money and grinding it out. Eventually dude ends up with some weird sores on his ding-a-ling and gets super freaked out. Goes to Planned Parenthood and a few days later he is confirmed to have herpes. Chick was banging some of the dudes from the cleaning service and had started to see one on the side. She was dating him on the side some nights when she was supposed to be at work. She had been dating my friend for almost 6 years at this point. Friend freaks out. Bad breakup. He ends up with most of the cash and she gets herpes from her side boyfriend. Messed him up for a long time though. He thought he was never going to be able to frick or find a girl again. Thankfully he has been able to do both, and the last time we saw her was at an alley looking rough as frick looking at the bananas. On my grandmother's 85th birthday, a party was organized. My whole family was there. This is all happening in northern Mexico, so the invitation rules were pretty loose. I was about 17 at the time, so were most of my cousins. One of them, Gerardo, didn't have a girlfriend at the time, so he came with a friend, Oscar. They had been hanging around for about 4 years, but this was the first time Oscar was gonna meet the family. When they arrived, an older cousin was going around the parking lot collecting money from every cousin so we could buy some booze. Gerardo said he would ask his father for some money. Oscar accompanied him. When they entered the hall where the main party was taking place, Oscar ran back out. He said he had seen his father, who he had only seen twice before. Gerardo curiously asked who he was. They both entered and Oscar pointed to the man. Turns out my uncle was also Oscar's father. Oscar got to meet all of the family. We all got to meet the cousin we didn't knew we had. My aunt didn't come out as a lesbian until she was in her mid-40s. Coming from a pretty traditional Mexican family, she was scared that nobody would accept her for who she was, so she hid and lived this double life for the longest time. When she finally came out, it caught everyone by surprise, but everyone was extremely supportive of her. A friend close to me, who worked with me, had always talked about her boyfriend. Let's call him Dave. She would talk about her evening plans with him, holidays they went on, and so on. Other friends tried to Google him and search for him on Facebook out of an morbid curiosity to see what he looked like, but never came up with anything. Then, one Christmas party, she took me outside and told me she was engaged, but that wasn't the full story. She was actually engaged to Danielle, a woman, and had spent the last few years covering up the fact she was gay by completely fabricating Dave. He had never existed, and all stories and anecdotes were actually about Danielle. I remembered being so pleased she was engaged, but just had an overwhelming feeling of sadness for her that she had had to hide her true life at work. I met Danielle later on and she introduced herself as Dave. My high school football coach. This guy was a holy roller, church elder, started a chapter of Fellowship of Christian Athletes at my school, made us run for saying bad words, the whole nine. He was married to the school guidance counselor and had 2 kids who went to our school. A few years after I graduated, Bye for now.